Hello, everybody, to hopefully insightful presentation that I have prepared to share with you today, how to make it to the C-suite. Now, I want to pre-frame it a little bit by saying that I'm not sure there is such a thing as a sure win recipe. You know, it's a little bit like in sports. If Cristiano Ronaldo or Messi tell us what's the secret formula for success and what helped them get there, it increases our chances of potentially being a great football player ourselves. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to be the next Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo. So in a way, this sharing that I will be imparting with you shortly, which are pretty much three principles as well as one fundamental thought process to have if you want to make it to the C-suite, are based on our experience with dealing with the senior executives, with placing and doing searches for C-level, whether it's chief operations officers, CEOs, whether it's chief supply chain officers across many companies. So there tend to be certain things that come up again and again and again. And if you master those skills, the chances of success are much higher. So with that being said, let me start. Fundamentally, first and foremost, I think, even before we look into the three skills or topics that I will be sharing, we need to work, and you need to work on self-awareness. Nobody can make it to the C-suite, or it's very unlikely if they are not self-aware. So what do I mean by self-aware, right? You need to constantly, depending on the stages of your career, you know, from early on to all the way when you've made it maybe to senior positions or just before you've made it to the C-level, and even when you are C-level itself, you need to constantly work on yourself, right? Whether that means having an executive coach and constantly working on areas for improvement, or constantly having somebody to mirror and show you what you don't know, right? We don't know what we don't know, and for that we need a coach, and usually in the management arena it's called executive coach, to help us. On the way to getting to senior positions, the key aspect is mentorship. Having mentors, having multiple mentors that can show you, can teach you, can share with you how can you grow, what are the areas of development, what are some of the shortcuts, as well as to help you see things that you might not be able to usually see by yourself. And obviously self-awareness is much broader than that, but is in principle a principle of make sure you constantly work and know yourself. Pretty basic, but without this, I would say that it is fairly difficult to progress to the executive levels in organizations. Good. Now, moving to the three aspects that I believe personally are key to anybody that wants to access C-level, executive level positions within companies. Number one, it's about people. If you don't like people, you shouldn't be in executive positions. Now, again, it may sound like it's a pretty obvious thing to do or to say. However, I cannot stress this enough, and I have also seen people that perhaps, and there is a way in which you can make it to senior positions and not necessarily be a fan of people. And I'm, you know, obviously there's extroverts and there is introverts. This has nothing to do with that, right? You can be an introvert and still, you know, and still like people and like developing teams. So I think that's the number one criteria for being a successful leader. Very obvious one, but I cannot stress this enough. You need to like people. You need to understand that your job is to develop people. Your job is to get work done through people, and is not, you know, obviously to be an individual contributor, because that's not why somebody would hire you for a C-level. There's a couple of other considerations, right? You obviously need to be, or to master the skill of being able to manage top down, right? So that means sharing a vision, rallying the troops, right? Rallying the teams towards a common goal, and having that skill set to get them together working in the common direction is a must for anybody that is obviously in an executive level or a position. At the same time, that's balancing that act with the bottom up, right? Some of the best leaders that we've interacted with and that we have seen and observed are people that are able to also do the day-to-day, to also get down to the floor level if must in a plant or in a warehouse, connect at that level with the staff, get a sense of what's going on, also show the way, walk the talk, and inspire the teams across the different levels of the organization to work through that vision that they had set up. So I think these are some of the the things. And maybe last, but definitely maybe most important, you need to think of yourself as a doctor, right? A leader, executive is a person that solves people's problems. So a lot of the times, it almost feels like a psychologist as well, because people come with all sorts of different issues and problems. And I would say a big chunk of the role of an executive is to fix people's problems, whether it is other people in the organization, the CEO, or if you're the chief supply chain officer, or the board if you're the CEO, as well as people in your team, right? And direct reports and so on. So I think being as a doctor and having that mindset of, I'm here to fix people's problems is key to this. Number two is networking, the skill that I see hugely important in terms of anybody making it to the C-suite is networking. So that means in the organization as well as outside the organization. This is something that needs to be mastered, because ultimately, again, it kind of goes back to the point with people, right? You need to like people, but networking is a little bit more specific, and I want to talk about this. Nobody will get to the executive level unless a lot of people within that organization believe that that person is fit to be in an executive role. And obviously that applies throughout one's career, right? So networking is key. Your network is your net worth. And like one of my first bosses told me, right, make sure that as many people know you as possible within and in and out of the organization. I was interviewing recently on the podcast Shelley Archambault, who is a board member in a couple of companies. She's been a CEO for a long time, and she's orchestrated one of the biggest expansions in a technology company in the world. And she was sharing that a couple of very useful tips in terms of networking that I'll share the number one with you here, which was, no matter when you meet somebody in the organization, always tell them what you do, because there's small talk and people ask, so what do you do? What are you working on? And then her advice was, say quite a few words about what you're working on. I'm working on this big client that I'm looking to close, and that will help the company expand the sales target, or I'm working on this project that is very complex, and I'm a little bit anxious about it, but I'm hoping to get it through. Don't just say I'm fine, right? So take every opportunity to tell people what you do, to network, to make them aware of what you're building and what's your role in the company. And that will obviously help more people know about you. Don't just be there minding your own business and doing your own job, because that in itself will not propel you and will not help you necessarily in being visible. And if you're not visible, typically people will not necessarily know what you're doing, and then that obviously can prevent you from accessing higher and higher levels of your career. So that's an important part of networking. Now I will talk also about the external part of networking, right, which in my mind involves being present on social media. LinkedIn obviously is a good platform. I'm not saying be there every day, but I'm saying be there and be seen as a thought leader, right? So be seen as somebody from the industry that shares their opinions, that shares their thoughts, that tries to add value, because that visibility, again, helps both within the company as well as outside of the company. And speaking at events, speaking at summits, taking part and contributing. I see a lot of people in my network doing it well, whether it's with students, whether it's with academia, whether it's in industry forums. That again helps increase your brand, increase your visibility, and usually the people that are most visible, you may or may not like it, we may or may not like it, but usually the people that are most visible and have the largest networks have access to the best opportunities and have the highest chance of making it to the executive suite. Third point and final point from my side, and third thing that I cannot emphasize enough how important it is, skill it is to make it to the C-suite, is storytelling. The ability to tell a story, to communicate with passion, to get people buying into an idea, or influencing people, whether it's your board, whether it's your senior managers, whether it's the CEO, to get behind a certain idea that you have. Some people, and one of my good friends, Luca Fichiara from Nestle, calls it a brand ambassador. You need to be able to elevate, if you're in supply chain, to elevate the role of supply chain, sell the importance of supply chain within the functions in the company, explain to the other managers that may or may not understand fully what's the role, right? And obviously be that brand ambassador. A very good example of storytelling is if you know The Little Prince, the book The Little Prince from Antoine d'Exupéry. He's saying, if you want to get people to build a boat, don't tell them what to do, and don't tell them to chop and bring wood together. Teach them to teach them to want the openness and the vastness of the sea. That's an example of a story. That's an example of, you know, of how to do it. And you know, I think it's something that is badly needed in supply chain, in manufacturing, in engineering. This is specifically in this type of functions, because, you know, usually people are very practical. Engineers by design are practical. They get stuff done. However, stories have that flame that can get that fire that can get people rallied together, and that makes all the difference. And that isn't required if you are to be in an executive role, because you're obviously, again, doing everything through people, and you need to be able to motivate people to get things done. Another example and story I want to share is with Ken Allen, who orchestrated, board member of DHL, orchestrated the biggest turnaround in the history of DHL, in the history of logistics, really. DHL Express was losing 2 billion euros. He turned it around to make a profit of 2 billion euros in the spur of a couple of years. Part of the success of Ken was the fact that he was and he is, and I definitely want, if you can Google him, and you know, he has a few great videos on YouTube. He is a great storyteller, and he would use something very simple. He would use songs to make a message. And again, DHL, you know, think DHL Express is couriers, right? They have people that deliver the packages, right? So it's you know, it's from that level of staff all the way to the CEO and to the C-level of DHL Express. So what he would do, he would rally them together. He would have a song playing with a theme, right, that he would want, you know, everybody in the organization to understand, whether it was customer, crazy about your customer, right? And then he would play a song on that topic, or whether, usually it was 3 or 4 points that he wanted to exemplify, and he would use the songs to make sure everybody in the organization, because the song would send one message. Again, another way to tell a story. So this is something that is quite, I would say, essential. So again, if I'm to summarize, number one, it starts with self-awareness. Know yourself, pretty basic, but you know, unless you know yourself, you cannot help others. Unless you lead yourself, you cannot lead others. Simple principle. And then the 3 different pointers that I would argue consistently across the people in the executive level that I have seen, I have interacted with, are focus on people, network, know a lot of people in and out of the organization, and thirdly, storytelling, the ability to tell a story, the ability to communicate. This tend to be fairly consistent across the board. Now, of course, is this all? No, it's more complex than that, but I would say if you master these skills and if you work on these skills over the course of your career, there is a big chance that that you will make it to the C-suite. I hope this was relevant, and thank you for your attention.